Joining us now is Matt Priest, the president and CEO of Footwear Distributors and Retailers of America, which supports nearly 500 companies and brands around the globe. Matt, it's great seeing you. Thank you. So what's first your reaction to President Trump saying that Vietnam is ready to bring its tariffs down to zero?
You know, Jose, thanks for having me on. It's a positive development for sure. We've been engaged with both the American government and the Vietnamese government, and there's a posture, I think, with the Vietnamese government to try to get to a deal, and so we're encouraged by that. The challenge, though, as your chart indicated, and we want your viewers to be crystal clear on this, that 46% tariff on Vietnamese goods that takes effect next Wednesday evening is on top of what we already pay out of Vietnam. So a sneaker that's got a 20% duty will now be 66% out of Vietnam. And there's been a lot of misinformation about how these tariffs work, but you stack them on top of each other, and that's going to drive down consumer engagement and foot traffic, and we're already seeing that in our internal numbers.
So break down some of that misinformation for us, and for people like me that aren't well versed on, for example, just what the tariff is between Vietnam and the United States, and what are the major goods that the United States gets from Vietnam. What are the numbers, and what do those numbers mean as far as American businesses?
Yeah, so the fact of the matter is the president held up a chart in the Rose Garden on Wednesday that indicated that these countries were paying these exorbitant duties and that we needed the reciprocal duties to combat that. The problem with that chart is that it wasn't the actual duties that countries charge our exports. Those are much, much lower. It was an entirely different calculation. But what your viewers need to understand, the American people need to understand, Jose, is that the fact is that these do stack on top of each other. So I just gave you one example. There's another example out of Vietnam. It's a 37.5% duty with the 46% duty. You have to get out your calculator at this point because things are going to move into triple digits very quickly. And that's going to be higher prices for consumers. Undeniable that will happen. The other problem is that in order for companies to try to get a lower base rate, and even though they have these elevated duties, they're going to strip out quality components and features and other items that go into a pair of shoes. So the quality of goods will decline when you have such a high cost pressure on imports that people need to buy, and they have to buy them from overseas sources.
It's difficult for most, and I start by including myself, to really understand the interconnectivity of business, and the global aspect of it. When you buy an American-made car, many times that American-made car has parts from some other country. Part of it is built in another country and brought back into the United States to finish the construction of that car. How much does the United States depend on global markets for all of the goods and services that we have?
We are the largest, most powerful economy in the world and in history, Jose, and we should be very proud of that. It's the American dream over and over again. And the way this is described is that when there's a trade deficit, we're getting a raw deal. But the fact of the matter is we have the spending power, particularly for these nations that are developing and are clearly not ripping us off to that extent. But I can tell you, even when you look at domestic production of footwear in the U.S., we represent the majority of domestic producers here. This action announced on Wednesday increases all the costs and duties and taxes on top of inputs, components, and machinery and materials needed for production here. So the policy is really not lining up with the rhetoric. And so our hope is that this call is positive, that there's an outcome that we can drive more certainty and lower costs for American consumers.
Matt, why have so many businesses and products that were made in the United States so many decades ago stopped existing? Why is it that so few things are made in the United States? Not that there aren't a lot of things made in the United States, but so much more could be made in the United States. And how do you deal, Matt, with other countries that utilize and exploit their own people's labor and essentially have zero costs or very low costs in their labor market because they own that labor market and they exploit it to the ultimate degree with massive human rights violations?
Yeah, I'm glad you bring this up because American companies globally, not just in our industry, Jose, but across all industries, have high Western standards and values. And when we come into a country and engage with manufacturers in that country, we often and most likely drive up we drive up changes in law, we drive up reform as it relates to labor practices. We have highly sophisticated monitoring programs to ensure that workers are being treated. It's a legitimate question, but it's one that we've worked on for decades, and we're very proud of our record. I mean, at the end of the day, though, we're now faced with these added costs that is ultimately one of the largest increases in American history when it comes to taxes. We've seen this play out before in 1828, in the late 19th century, and then the early 20th century. And every single time, costs go up, jobs go down, and the party in power loses power. So,
Matt Priest, I thank you very much for being with us. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jose.